Hello. So today we're going to talk about subtracting integers. We have two kinds of integers that we're talking about here, and as you guys know, they are positive and negative. So positive and negative. All right. After that, so we're going to talk about subtracting. So the tip, subtracting an integer is the same as blank its opposite. So what that means is the missing word here is adding its opposite. So subtracting an integer is the same as adding its opposite. When you see minus, so when you have a minus or a negative, when you have to kind of make some changes so that instead of saying a negative, we change it to a positive. Because if I'm subtracting a negative, I'm actually just adding a positive. Positive. Sorry about that. Okay. So again, instead of subtracting a negative, we add a positive. Next. So here's examples now. 3 minus negative 8. So we change this to read 3 minus minus, right? So we make it a plus 8, positive 8. And that gives us 11. 20 minus 3, well, we know that that is 17 because we've previously learned that. But when I have a negative 20 minus 3, instead for this one, I'm not going to, because it's just one negative, I'm going to subtract more. We're going to use the other property that we learned previously, that we add those two negatives together, and then we keep the sign, so it is a negative 23. And then lastly, we're going to do another one where we subtract from, so negative or minus a negative, we're going to make it a positive, right? So now we have negative 5 plus 8, and as we talked about before, we can turn that around. The largest number minus the smaller number, and we keep the sign of the larger number. Okay. Next, remember negative 7 minus 2 is the same as negative 7 plus negative 2, which we just mentioned. And that will give us a negative 9, because 7 plus 2 is 9, and we keep that negative. For our next section here, we want to figure out what we've got. So let's start with, to subtract 3 and add the negative 8, or that negative, we want to turn it into a positive. So negative 3 from negative 8, add enough zero pairs to subtract 8 negatives. So what we have is we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 negatives, and we have to add 5 more positives, because we started with 3, right, to zero that out. So he crossed out the 8 negatives. So that gave us the 8 negatives that we had plus 3 more, which gives us 11. Because we're subtracting away 8 negatives. So we want to take 8 negatives away. And that left us with 8 positives. Because we got to make those 0 pairs. And now we have 8 positives left over. And that gives plus the 3 we had. There we go. Oh, I forgot the 3 we had to start with. Alright. If you've got any questions about that, let us know. I know it's kind of it gets a little messy, but if you draw this stuff out, it makes it a lot easier for you to see using these circles. My guys, you've already worked with some of this, so if you have any questions, let me know, and we'll go over it again. Number line. So if I say a 3 minus a negative 4, change it to a positive. So, well, we know we're going to change this to a plus 4. But what does that look like on a number line? Well, I'm starting at 3. So 1, 2, 3. Here is 3 where I start. And then I'm going to do the opposite. So the minus means do the opposite. So minus a negative 4. So if subtract goes this way, but do the opposite of what it says, means to go this way. So 1, 2, 3, 4, which puts me at 7. Okay, this puts me at 7. And then when I look at this over here, this is when subtracting negatives. We want to move to the right because subtracting a negative we're actually going to add, so we're going to go move to the right. When subtracting positives, we move to the left. So basically what that means is if I subtracted 4, I would go left. But since I'm doing a negative negative, it's the opposite of a negative. So I go to the right. Alright, so subtract the negative, we go right. Subtract the positive, we go left. Alright, let's take a look now at the back of the sheet. See if we can solve a couple of these problems real quick. So, which expression below equals 5? Negative 10, let's see. We can figure out each one of these. Let's see, we have a negative 12 so plus 5. So we can say largest number minus the smaller number gives me 7. And then since this is a negative, this is a negative. Here we have a negative 3 minus minus, so we're plus a 4. Larger number minus the smaller number. That's a 1. That one was a positive, so this one's a positive. So there's a 1 and a negative 7, so neither of them are in. Then 2 times 3 is going to be 6. And then let's see, negative 10 plus, because they minus minus, so plus 15. The larger one minus the smaller one gives me 5. And that one was a positive, so my answer is a positive 5. Then we have Aurelio has $52 in his checking account. He writes a check for $79. What is Aurelio's checking account balance after writing the check? Well, we know that if he had $52 in his account and he wrote a check for $79, which don't ever do that because it's more than what you have in your account. However, since it's already done, we need to figure out what's left. So what we want to do is we want to say, okay, well, this is a little harder, so let's flip it over and say larger number minus the smaller number, and we get 27. The larger number was a negative, so our answer is negative. Now we have a negative 27, and we see that right here. So remember, when we have different signs, we subtract the smaller from the larger and use the sign of the larger number. Next, we have, which equation is best represented by the number line below? Well, we can see there's the arrow, so we're going to end with the answer n. So that's our answer. We're subtracting 9, and here we can see we are at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. So we need something that looks like 15 minus n, or minus 9 equals n, which is right here. We can also figure out that n is then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So our answer is 15 minus n equals 6. Okay, lastly, we have one more problem, and this problem says we want to find the model below. The model below has a value of a negative 2. Which model shows how to solve the equation? All right, well, if we look at it, we can kind of figure out how to solve this. So what we want to do is we want to see, well, how many of how many do we have? So we can count them up, and we can see, well, we have a 0 pair here and a 0 pair here, and a 0 pair here and a 0 pair here. Then we have a 0 pair, and we have 2 negatives here, and we have another 0 pair and another 0 pair and another 0 pair. So what we want to look at is how to solve it from this point. Looking down at the bottom here, we can see these even out with all 0 pairs, and then these two are also 0 pairs, so that doesn't give us a negative 2. Here we can see we have a positive and a positive and a positive and a positive, so here's a 0 pair, here's a 0 pair, but I have positives left, so that's not going to work. Here I have left over 2 positives and 2 positives, and there's 2 more, so that's too many. So we're going to look at this one. This one gives us those 4 negatives and 2 positives, so that's 4 negatives minus our 2, plus our 2 positives, which gives us a negative 2.